I'm a 33-year-old man, my wife is 27. Since the start of our relationship, my wife has been very particular about how things get done, and tends to believe that she knows the one true correct way for anything related to anything. She has admitted that she can be a control freak. While this bothers me, it has never been a true deal breaker in our relationship. Very often when I do just about anything, whether it be a household chore, assembling a piece of furniture, taking a picture, or writing a presentation for work, in a field where I have a master's degree and she has no formal education, she'll do this thing where she'll condescendingly say, "You were so close to getting it right," really drawing out the "so close" part. I've told her dozens of times that I'd prefer for her to stop because it sounds so condescending, but she insists that she's complimenting me. I do the dishes and place them out to dry in an orientation she doesn't approve of. "Wife, you were so close. Next time put them that way." I take a picture of her. "Wife, you were so close, next time angle the camera this way." I complete a project at work and show her the results. "Wife, you were so close, next time, write it this way." For the last 2 months my wife has been undergoing an intensive hiring process for a job in our city. She works in a highly niche field and seldom finds job openings, and therefore she was ecstatic to have the opportunity for a relatively well-paying job doing what she wants to do. She got to the very final stage where the company was considering 2 people, coincidentally the other of whom was her college roommate. Well, on Friday she got the call, telling her thanks for her application but blah blah blah. Record on file, all that jazz. My wife came to me crying. I immediately comforted her and, "You were so close," blurted out. Her head whipped up and she asked what I meant by that. I said she was so close to getting the job, but was just a bit off. She immediately walked out to stay at her friend's house, where she is currently sulking. She finally sent me a text this afternoon calling me a huge jerk. Was I unnecessarily being an asshole here? My wife and I are both in our mid-30s and have a 14-year-old son. I've been a stay-at-home dad all his life while my wife has been more hands-off due to a somewhat demanding job. Still, some basic facts that anyone with even a surface-level knowledge of our kid knows is that he's a good boy, he gets great grades and is well-behaved. He's maybe a little spoiled, but aren't they all? My point is, I have rarely had to step in and deliver any real punishments thanks to open and consistent dialogue between the two of us. I have a longtime friend who plays in a decently popular local band. He's a father figure to my son and they also have a very close bond thanks to similar interests. My son has always been the artsy type and he's so excited when friend comes over because it means he can show him the latest guitar he's added to his collection or a new riff he's learned. During friend's recent visit, he mentioned going on tour soon and my son was intrigued. After pressing for details, he came to me later and asked if he could go with them on his fall break. He had plenty of promises at the ready, that he would listen to whatever friend said, that he would be on his best behavior, that he would never ask for anything ever again. After talking it out with him, I gave him a maybe. I reached out to friend for his thoughts, and he was all for it. I figured he wouldn't mind since he has a son around my kid's age who goes on tour with him occasionally, another thing my son had mentioned while pleading his case to me. I asked my wife and after a very brief conversation, she agreed. Fast forward to the beginning of last week when he got packed up and set to leave. My wife asked where he was going, I reminded her, and she said she thought I was joking. I had no idea what part of it sounded like a joke, but she claimed my son wasn't allowed to go. I eventually persuaded her after our child went to his room in near tears. When he arrived home yesterday, I had never seen him so happy. He got to help the roadies set up for the shows, he got let into bars, he intentionally didn't wash off one of the X's on the back of his hands just so he could come home with it and show me, and friend was singing his praises over how helpful he was. A few hours later, my son made a social media post compiling photos from his time on tour. The caption was a long one but included such gems as, "This almost didn't happen, thanks mom." And, "Friend spent a lot of his free time with me, unlike my mom, This led to a pretty big argument where my wife, upon being alerted to the post's existence, demanded he take it down. He refused, so she turned to me and asked me to talk to him. I refused. I told her that while I didn't think what he was doing was right, it was clearly coming from somewhere. And that somewhere was a place in which he was feeling unheard and ignored by her. She's been ignoring me since. Is this not normal? I'm turning 16 in less than a month, and my parents had talked about throwing me a party with my friends and family there to celebrate, and I let myself get excited about it, which I am starting to feel was dumb on my part. See, I have a little sister Ava, and she's 7. She was a baby my parents tried to have for a few years after I was born, but struggled, and then she was born premature and almost died. It meant my parents had to put a lot of time into her when she was little. It meant a lot of the time our world revolved around her. Back then I would hear people say once she was a little older that things would return to normal. They never really did. My parents prioritize Ava over me. I know she's a lot younger and it makes sense at times, some examples of it, but not all. 2 years ago for Christmas I really wanted a PS5. I made a deal with my parents that if I saved up X amount of money, they would pay the rest for it as a gift. A drop came close by us and I had the money. Mom told me that Ava needed a haircut and they wanted to pamper her a little because she'd been to the developmental pediatrician, which she hates. So the money that would have gotten the PlayStation 5 went on her, and I never got the PS5. Instead, I got some clothes and food stuff for Christmas. And the food was share items we get. Not even my favorites. My high school did an award ceremony in May to celebrate students who helped make the school better. I was given one for helping others in school and acting as a mentor of sorts. Ava's school play was on the same day, and both of my parents chose to go to the school play instead of the award ceremony. They didn't even remember to ask me about it when I got home. My birthdays have always been more aimed at something Ava will enjoy too. We do Chuck E. Cheese where I can bring a friend, or they hire a bounce house for family to come over, but always a smaller one, which means I don't get to enjoy it because younger kids and small bounce house. The spotlight always goes to her at least once. She's blown out my birthday candles since she was 2, this year I really thought it would be different. All the plans were sounding really fun too. Then my parents found out Ava was being bullied in school and was having a rough time. They told me she wasn't looking forward to anything, including my party, and that they thought it would be nice to do something she could enjoy, and give her some of the spotlight on the day, where we assure her she's loved and wanted. I told them it was my birthday and I thought they wanted me to enjoy it. They told me they do, but Ava needs this and that. As her big brother I should be thinking about how to make her feel special. I told them I deserve to feel that way too. Then I told them if they were going to do this to me again, I was done. I told them not everything needs to be about Ava. That she might be their whole world. She might be their whole focus in life. But she is not mine. My parents got so mad at me. Am I the asshole? I decided to apply for my dream job. I have met all the criteria, and one of them was to be proficient in my native language, Russian, which I am, since I've grown up in the country speaking and writing in it and have finished school and university where obviously all the subjects are taught in Russian, except English and French/German language classes. I ended up securing the interview with this place and needed to demonstrate the knowledge of Russian. So the person who did the interview started asking me questions in it. However, I could barely understand her. Not only the accent made it incredibly difficult, but the fact that she couldn't build a sentence, but also used incorrect forms of the words, and the pronunciation was totally wrong too. In short, it sounded as if she was randomly putting the words in Google Translate and was trying to repeat them over. I have answered all her questions, however I've also noticed she barely made any notes. I decided to let it pass and wait for a verdict. After about 3 months of chasing and silence, I got an email saying I wasn't successful, and the reason was that they believed my knowledge of Russian language was poor and insufficient for the job and not up to their standards, according to the interviewer. Of course I was confused, since the lady who interviewed me could barely speak the language herself. So I have decided to leave feedback about my experience on one of the job sites, which was made to share info about working at the job and interview process. My review received a fair amount of traction, and last week Monday I ended up getting a call from the higher-ups, who listened to my feedback and opened the investigation. On Friday I have found out the lady who interviewed me was dismissed. She and her friends were messaging me on social media calling an asshole, because this job was her only source of income and was struggling. I am now feeling guilty about this and feel like I was an asshole for writing about my experience. Am I in the bad here? My wife has a genetic disorder that we just found out about, causing her to form blood clots very easily. She had a very serious incident about 6 months ago, was in the hospital for 2 weeks and will now be on medication for life. When her doctors they figured out the issue. She's a social smoker, it only does it every now and then, typically with her friends and when she's having a drink. However, I've explained to her how dangerous it is, coupled with her medical condition, to be smoking at all. I haven't made much progress, and she smoked a number of times since she's left the hospital. Finally, yesterday at a party I confronted her in front of her friends, 7 or so at a party at our house, and I told them how serious her condition is. I was very polite and I asked them for their help to try to influence her to stop. I apologize for having to bring this up at a party, but it's very serious and I'm worried that she will not stop without their insistence. Obviously she's very annoyed at me and hasn't spoken to me for the last day. My sister Stephanie was our parents' golden child, while me and my other sister Emily were always an afterthought. Our parents would tell Emily it was okay for Stephanie to insult her and steal her things because she's your baby sister. They would allow Stephanie to do the same to me because your big sister knows better than you and you need to listen to and respect her. Stephanie was the center of attention at any event. She would get more gifts than us on our own birthdays and would also get to select the theme and who was invited. This has continued even as Stephanie is now an adult. Stephanie not only chose a place I hated for my graduation dinner, but she also chose to announce her pregnancy at the same dinner, and my parents knew about it. They scolded me for being upset because a diploma's a piece of paper. This is a new life. And they said how important it was that everyone was there for the news of the family's first grandchild. I realized that they would never value me compared to Stephanie. Since then, I have not spoken to Stephanie or my parents beyond emergencies concerning other family members, and neither has Emily. We have communicated slightly more since my mother passed away, but it is still extremely limited. I am getting married, and my father has reached out to me about the plans for he and Stephanie to arrive early, since he assumed that he would be walking me down the aisle while Stephanie would be an honorary lead bridesmaid of sorts. Emily is already my maid of honor. I explained to my father that Matt, my best friend since college, would be walking me down the aisle. My father started making comments about how this was ridiculous/disrespectful because the man who raised me and gave me life should matter more to me than some college buddy. He then demanded to know about Stephanie's spot as a bridesmaid. I told him that Stephanie was not invited to the wedding because I know if Stephanie attends that she will as always be made the center of attention. I want a day about me and my own accomplishments, milestones, instead of it being all about Stephanie. I don't care how bratty it sounds. He kept arguing. I got fed up and told him he can go walk the daughter he actually cared about down the aisle, and hung up. Now multiple people, mostly extended family, are calling me an asshole on various points. They are saying how my mother became extremely ill during her pregnancy with Stephanie. The doctors were not optimistic about them both surviving. And I could never truly understand what that would be like to live in constant fear of losing your child. Many are saying that I am wrong to ban Stephanie from the wedding, because in a way she is also a victim of our parents' favoritism. They point out that Stephanie isn't having the easiest time in life right now, and she could use some sisterly support/involvement. I disagree with these points, but I want an outside opinion. My sister and her husband opened their own restaurant together on Friday. They had wanted to do it for years but started the steps to take the plunge during our first lockdown. This meant a lot to my sister, who always wanted to be a business owner. Months ago she had asked me to be their opening night with my family. I had promised her faithfully that I would. Our relationship has suffered a lot of late. I have always felt like I do more for her than she does for me, and it boiled over when 2 weeks ago she had asked to borrow some money, promising she would pay it back. I had asked her when she'd pay it back. She told me sometime. I told her it took months to pay me back the last time and that Christmas was coming up soon and this year was tight. She told me she knew and she would pay me back in less than 2 weeks, and that the money was super important for making sure everything went okay opening night, because the deposit on something she had hired had increased without her realizing and she didn't have the money available for it. I told her I wasn't sure if I trusted her to get me the money in 2 weeks. She couldn't believe I would bring up past issues at that moment, told me she was asking her big sister for help, and she would hope I would give it willingly. This made me more angry, and I asked her when had she willingly helped me with anything, when had made a point to prioritize being there for me. She told me I was more stable than her and nothing ever knocked me down. I pointed out my miscarriage at 13 weeks had been devastating to me, and that was when I needed support more than ever, but she had been preoccupied with something else. That she had told me after she felt too awkward talking to me. Yet when she had her first child she had talked non-stop about her fears of losing her baby, because I had a couple of years before that. We ended up not speaking, and then the opening of her restaurant came and I didn't show up. She was upset/mad/frustrated with me, and her husband told me she had waited and waited for me, had told other people I would be there and then didn't show. I feel bad, and at the same time, I just don't know if I want to bother anymore. She frustrates me so much. But I love her at the same time. I know I let her down by not being there, and that's why I ask. Am I the asshole?